Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, good morning. Good morning if you're in the US, particularly in California. A very early good morning to you. Otherwise, good afternoon or maybe even good evening. A warm welcome to today's webinar for SSE Alumni, hosted by the Stockholm School of Economics in collaboration with American Friends of SSE, the SSE Alumni Chapter based in the US. Today's focus will be on how restaurants are adapting to the COVID-19 situation to compare between Sweden and the US, and particularly between Stockholm and New York City. On the panel, we have two recognized restaurateurs, and to get the scholar view and the broad perspective, we of course have a representative of our dear Handelshögskolan. I am Cecilia Browning, very honored to be a host today. A graduate of Handels, more than a few years ago, actually a few decades ago. I started in 1981. Our goals and hopes are that even though we're social distancing these days, these kind of webinars will actually make us feel closer and reconnect as alumni. And today, to connect even further, we have a little twist. We have Emma Bengtsson, who is one of the very few chefs actually in the world who have attained 2 Michelin stars, to teach us how to make Gravlax, Emma style. So that will be in order to make us connect even further today. Since 2006, I have had the honor to work at House of Sweden here in Washington, DC. I am the GM, and I would like to invite you to a virtual tour of our building. House of Sweden is so much more than just the Embassy of Sweden. We have Swedish companies who have offices here. We have the Swedish American Chamber of Commerce, Embassy of Iceland, and so forth. But we also have an event center, and the virtual tour has been put together by the very talented team at the Embassy of Sweden, and it's about the event center and exhibit hall, showcasing the current exhibits. So please check it out. It's houseofswedenexhibitions.com, and I would ask maybe Anna or somebody to, or Yusha, to put it in the chat function. We are about to kick off today's speakers and program, and I'm sure that you're all Zoom pros by now, but just a couple of housekeeping rules. I'm sure you have noticed that you're muted. Sorry about that. We do, however, encourage you to participate by using the chat function. And if you can, if you don't mind, it would be fantastic if you could turn on your video. So it's so much nicer if we can see each other. And finally, we will be recording this webinar so you can watch it again and again and again. Okay, it is time to start the portion you've all been waiting for. And we're going to find out, how is the restaurant business adapting to the COVID-19 situation? What does the future look like? Will we ever go back? Or has the COVID-19 changed the industry forever? And maybe was that partly inevitable, but it's just been accelerated? I know that we have a fantastic panel here, and they're ready to take this discussion head on. So let me introduce them. Håkan Svan, alum and owner of the 2 Michelin star restaurant Aquavit in New York City. Johan Jureskog, chef and part owner of Rolfs Kök in Stockholm, owner of Restaurang AG, and also the fast food Jureskogs. And also, I need to mention this, a brand new dad. Congratulations. And Christopher Laurel, visiting researcher at Stockholm School of Economics, Institute for Research. So I'm sure you can all hear the applause here. It's so strange Zoom style, isn't it? But anyway, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to have you here. So let's introduce the panelists, and I'd like to find out who are they, or rather who were they before March 2020 this year. Håkan, it's so wonderful to have you here. As alumni on the East Coast in the US, every year we look forward to having you graciously host us in your restaurant to welcome spring and then for the Valborg festivities. But for those who don't live that close by, please tell us, who are you, or who were you before 2020 in March? And how did you end up in the US after graduating from Handels in the restaurant business on top of that? Håkan.
Thank you. Glad to be here and talk about this today. I graduated in 1977. Worked a few years at Procter & Gamble before I came to the US in 1980, and started my food business with some Swedish people in 81, and opened Aquavit in 1987. So we're 32 years old, and today ranked higher actually than we've ever been, which is very nice. And leading up to this, we had just signed on a new 15-year lease in this space, and we renovated almost the entire last year. So we were not open until November, and we only had 2 months of the new restaurant to enjoy before this pandemic hit. And it's been sort of a breakneck speed these 5-6 months, and so many things happen and so quickly, and different things. And you basically in mid-March, all restaurants and bars were shut down by the city, and that was obviously big shock. So we had to put everybody on unemployment, and there was no other option because we had no idea what's going to happen. We hoped to open soon, but it turned out as things progressed that we see that that's not going to happen. And the next step was sort of, they promised to open in July 6 for some indoor dining. And just a few days before that, they decided, no, you cannot open. And the word, which was very terrible for the whole industry, was that opening is now indefinite. And that's one of the worst words you can hear. So we had received a lot of money from the government in terms of what's called a PPP, Payment Protection Program, and that was a big help for us, and that's why we were able to survive. And we have, since we knew we weren't going to be indoor July, we have started outdoor dining, which has been a success, but it's not the same thing as indoor. And now we're in mid-September, and look. Now we see that we are probably going to be opening September 30 for some indoor dining. So we hope that that's going to be a big help going forward.
Well, thank you, Håkan. That was a long story, not just who you were before, but thank you. Really appreciate it. And Johan, we know that you're super famous in Sweden, but for some of us who maybe have lived under a rock or have not spent much time in Sweden lately, can you tell us who you are, or rather, who were you before March 2020?
Well, I believe that I'm still basically the same as before COVID, but I'm in my 45, and I'm a chef from the beginning, and these days I call myself maybe a little bit of an entrepreneur as well. So I've been working in Paris for 3 years, working in Michelin restaurants, and decided back in 2003 to open or take over a very, very classic restaurant of Stockholm called Rollkök. It's still my baby, and me and my business companion also decided to open AG, which is, I would say, one of the most highlighted steakhouses in the world. We have given a lot of international awards, etc., etc. It's it's a really cool meat program that we do, and I do a lot of stuff for the meat industry here in Sweden also. And then I have a fast food chain called Djureskogs, which is basically it's not a rip-off of Shake Shack, but like I have the same history as Danny Meyer in New York City. I decided, and also I have a burger history. I will not have the time now to tell you about it, but I want to change the way of the way of fast food, the way fast food feels like in Sweden. The new way of fast food is my new philosophy. And then, of course, I have, as you can see, a lot of other brands, and I've done a lot of TV, etc. And I've been in the culinary team. I won the Olympics back in 2004, etc., etc., etc.
And a new dad.
Yeah, and I got my second child 2 weeks ago, and he has a really cool name. His name is John Djureskog, Triple J. That's gonna be awesome.
Well, thank you, Johan and Christopher. We're so honored to have you here. Your research is just so spot on, very timely. Who are you? And you must have started this research long before COVID happened.
Yeah, thank you, Cecilia. I'm Christopher Laurel, and I've been working with the digitization and industrial development and transformation the last 10 years. When I started out doing my research, I quickly became a part of a little group of 3-4 individuals that was sort of thinking that digitization might be something that would transform society in a couple of years' time. And what we have seen since then is essentially a lot of researchers turning their interest to how sectors of the economy becomes changed due to new technologies and platforms and whatnot. So my interest is essentially to understand how different sectors of the economy change because of technology, because of social or cultural reasons. So when COVID sort of struck, it has been very, very busy because now we have a unique opportunity to understand the underlying drivers of change in different industries. So besides the research, I've always done quite a lot of my empirical work in the creative industries. So ranging from fashion to dance to restaurants. So that's where my passion research-wise lies.
Very exciting. Well, we're so excited to have all three of you here, and we're really looking forward to this. Håkan, you were cheating a little bit and went ahead and not just with the timeline, but I would like to start with you again and talk about the timeline. Just like you were saying, you just went through a huge renovation and was obviously looking forward to a banner year with an upgraded restaurant. And your restaurant is in the upscale segment. So how do you feel? I mean, it must have been a shock to the system, obviously. I'm going to ask Johan to talk a little bit about the different categories that your restaurants are in and what happened in March. But if we can just start with Håkan, and how do you feel about the upscale segment? You were obviously not used to having takeout, for instance. I would imagine Emma that's not her forte, but you had to change quickly.
Well, I think when we went through a big renovation and primarily a brand new kitchen for Emma and the staff there, which was badly needed. And I think we actually, although the fine dining segment is important for us, that's where the Michelin stars come. We actually were planning to sort of gradually also emphasize a more casual portion of the restaurant, because we're looking at the future a little bit here. Actually having the fine dining a little smaller and working on a Nordic brasserie concept for us. So that we felt was a little easier to sort of scale up. Fine dining, 2-star Michelin, you just don't copy that on other places. It's just not possible. So we had already started to work on more casual food when COVID hit. So obviously being shut down is a complete shock to the system, and at least right when it happens, it almost reminded me of how we felt during September 11, 19 years ago. Initially, it's a kind of a sense of complete helplessness first, but you cannot stay with that feeling. You have to sort of sit down and say, oh, wait a second, we need to find a way to move forward. And like I said, in terms of the progression of during the spring, it was very difficult to understand exactly what are the parameters for being reopening again. Yeah. And we knew already from the beginning that the only way to come out of this is we need a lot of help, whether it's from government help, landlord help, bank help. There was no way that we were going to be able to do this entirely on our own.
Thank you. So Johan, you have restaurants in different segments. Can you tell us a little bit about what differences did you see? Was it harder in the fine dining segment than in the fast food, for instance? Please tell us.
Well, Rollkök is a little bit of a bistro, and AG is more like an upscale steakhouse, a huge one, and Jureskogs is fast food. And I have a little bit of the same history as Håkan. We had recently renovated AG. We had also started up 2 meat stores, and one in the big department store here in Stockholm called NK, and we had a smaller one in next to AG, with huge costs, of course, and I mean, COVID struck us in a really bad moment, liquid wise, and I was screaming. I mean, in Rollkök, we had a success 17 years as a restaurateur, increasing every year in the last 17 years. And then in 3 days, we lost 95% of our business. And if you compare the problems that Håkan has, that, I mean, his government shut down the restaurant, we had to be open, and we cannot fire staff as he can. We had to take care of our staff. The staff have to have salaries. So we were like, holy shit, we will Rollkök, which has been a restaurant since 30 years. It's not going to survive 2 months with the liquidity we had in the bank. So I was screaming a lot in media, and having a baby, it was the worst moment for me in my life. And of course, people are dying, and it feels a little bit strange to talk about having the inner stress that I had, but that was so scary. And then strangely, it came a stimulation quite fast from a program from the government that gave us the opportunity to have 60% of the salary of the staff paid by the government, and we were sending in schedules for 4 months, and we got basically money the day after. It was like it felt like the Swedish government had planned for this. I mean, I don't believe in conspiracies, theories, anything, but I think this was really scary, and it saved us. And then after that, we decided we have never been open during summer, both Rollkök and AG, and we decided to have it open in July. We close normally 5 weeks. And that was a huge success. We calculated maybe that we're gonna have 100 customers per day in big AG. We did 215 seats every day in July. It was a huge success. And I can tell you something which I'm so glad to say, and we're going to speak a little bit about that later on. But last week in AG, we sold for more money than we did the same week last year. So we have taken off our stimulation in AG. Rollkök is back in 70% maybe, and in the fast food segment, it's been dead in the city center. But then we are on the move now. We are opening Euroskogs all over Sweden, and we do drive-throughs, and it's been we're building houses next to Max and McDonald's to try to make people understand that quality is something here to stay, and I mean sustainability, etc., etc. And it's been a crazy success. So with those two houses, we are basically saving the restaurants inside of Stockholm and down in Lund.
Well, I guess all I can say is congratulations during this difficult time.
Yes. Thank you.
It's very interesting though, because a lot of people, particularly here in the US, most people think that nothing happened and business as usual the whole time in Sweden. I mean, that's what we hear or people think about. So maybe Christopher, maybe you can talk a little bit about the differences on a more global level, maybe I should say, or at least between Stockholm and New York. How do you see that?
Well, when it comes to research tends to be a quite time-consuming process. Things can take years and years before it's eventually published. But one of the things that has happened due to COVID is that there is no time to wait until 2023 to get results of what is happening here and now. So the publication sort of processes have sped up incredibly, which is a nice thing. So before the panel, I was reading up on what we know research-wise with regards to both Europe and the United States, and especially the state of the restaurant industry. And apparently it seems that one of the challenges that the restaurant industry has, both in Europe and in the US, is a constant liquidity problem, essentially. We see that restaurants are more or less dependent on a relatively steady stream of revenue in order to be able to survive. So what's happened in Europe and what's happened in the US when people willingly or forcefully has isolated themselves at home is that you don't have a steady stream of revenue anymore. And because you have a liquidity situation on aggregated industry level that is quite low, this has meant that this particular sector of the economy has been even the one that has taken the largest hit because of both lockdowns, but also these measures that other kinds of governments has taken that relates to public bans. So industries that sort of have business as usual, we find them in insurance, we find them in finance, we find them also in the digital domain platforms such as Netflix and whatnot. But in the bottom of the list, you find restaurants, unfortunately. So it has been a very, very tough situation initially.
Yeah, no, it's just, I guess it's just the media wants us to kind of believe that in Sweden nothing happened. It was all kept open. So it's very interesting to get the actual views here. Can we focus a little bit on the changes in customer behavior that you have seen? I'd be curious to hear, are the customer, are they still looking for the best food these days? So are they they're more looking for the restaurant that has the best cleanliness, and how is price sensitivity? Does it really matter how much it costs if you feel like it's clean? And how do you create an upscale restaurant atmosphere these days? I mean, maybe people don't want the waiter to come and pour the water all the time. They don't want the napkin folded in the lap and so forth. So how do you distinguish between those? So Håkan, if I can start with you, and you can talk about what you have seen in your restaurant.
Well, we are obviously in a little different situation than Johan in Sweden, who is actually his restaurants are open and functioning, because we are shut down, and we have not had a single customer in any of our dining rooms since March. We have an outdoor service, which obviously is a little different, but it's all about adapting to the circumstances. And for our outdoor dining, which has been very successful, we're not doing fine dining, because fine dining doesn't travel well, and just the fact that you're outdoor instead of indoor, you have to have conceptually something else. And that's more casual, it's less expensive, and also what we were finding is that in New York City, it was for a long time absolutely dead. It was not a single on the streets or in office buildings, and they never had more than 3% occupancy during this whole time. So there's no customers around at all. So it didn't matter if we were doing takeout, because we're not a takeout delivery kind of place. It didn't mean anything for us. We lived on the sort of government money that was doled out to restaurants or very quickly in April, and they used for payroll, and if you use it for payroll, you can use it from a few other things. That was a huge help for us. Without that, it was not possible to exist. But I think that you talk about cleanliness and how customers are going to maybe not only do it today, but maybe after COVID is over. And I think that obviously cleanliness and the whole idea of touchless, contactless dining is going to have a progression and stay with us to some extent. And I mean, we started already with outdoor dining. Instead of giving menus, we have a barcode on a sign where you put the phone up, and then you have your menu on your phone, and things like that I think will continue. And but what we're going to go through is really a productive and structural change with restaurants, which has to do with contactless, actually, because restaurants are very labor intensive. And that's not going to go on, because the labor cost in the US has escalated tremendously over the last few years. So restaurants have to adjust, and having fewer people doing the same thing. And that sort of falls a little bit into what people are looking for today, that less human contact. And it doesn't sound really attractive, but I think we'll have to adapt to having food, very good food, being done more with very sophisticated equipment. And it's not that we're going to lose our staff, but there are going to be less of us, I think.
So you feel like the service is not going to be very different in an upscale restaurant and a non-upscale, but the food is still going to be very different. That's how you
I think that there still will be a niche for upscale restaurants. And I mean, I go back a little bit again to September 11, when flying was the sort of question, but it was secured and everything is different now, but people are flying. And so I think people will still go to restaurants. I think the new generation will actually be adapting to a different way of eating, which may seem strange and not so attractive for the older generation, but I think it's actually going to be a very good product still, even fine dining.
Thank you, Håkan. So how about you, Johan? What have you seen in your different categories of restaurants? What are they really price sensitive these days? And are they looking for cleanliness more than good food?
I would like to start to say that everybody I talk to these days, and I mean, I'm out all day long talking to customers, working, meeting different people. Everybody's so fed up with COVID. They don't care so much anymore. And I would say in general, when you walk the streets and you go into restaurant, there are basically two things which is different before March, and it's the bar scene, and of course the nightclubs are closed here in Sweden. So it's, I mean, if you're a single person in the city, it's hard to be out looking for a date or something in the bar, because you have to be seated in the bar and you have to be served in the bar. So you cannot stand in the bar anymore. I have different concept, as you told before, Cecilia, and Rolf Kök is a small bistro. I would say it's the it doesn't exist a restaurant with more customers in a normal day in a smaller space in all sides of Sweden. I mean, it's one of the huge successful restaurants in Sweden, and we have 55 seats in Rolf Kök. And the biggest problem we have had so far is Rolf Kök, because people know people sit on each other. We have a really close bar, and people are sitting next to each other. People become friends, and it's been a huge problem all summer long to create the nice, cozy, crazy chaos atmosphere that Rolf Kök is. So and we also now understand that we rely very much on tourists, which is non-existent. I would say the fine dining scene, Håkan, here in Stockholm is working super. Franzén 3-star, Tommy Myllymäki's place outside the new place outside in Djurgården, which has 3-star ambitions, is full. Franzén is full. Operakällaren is full. I would say people are looking after restaurant that is that has more space, and that's why I would say AG also is one of the restaurants that has been working best in town here in Stockholm. The fast food scene is another story. I mean, we in the houses we have built outside of Stockholm in Mjölby and Värnamo, we have had like 1,500 customers per day, standing in a COVID queue, trying, eating, having fun. Basically, COVID didn't exist when I was working down there this summer. I mean, it's been crazy, absolutely. That's the truth. We don't feel so much about the Corona COVID situation here in Sweden anymore.
Okay, well, thank you, Christopher. I guess it's very hard to compare Sweden and New York in this aspect. Any thoughts on customer behavior?
It is indeed tricky to compare. And the tricky thing with this particular industry is that we have so many subsectors within the very same industry as well, serving different customer segments that are sort of asking for different kinds of things. But if we go back over the last 10 years, one of the trends has very much been focused on digitization, and McKinsey, I believed has sort of tried to capture the development that we have seen for a number of years now. Is in that staying in is the new going out, essentially. That more and more people eat at home because of delivery services such as Foodora, that is very popular in Stockholm, but also Uber Eats and whatnot. So the preliminary data that we have now on changes on aggregated level, both in Europe and the US, is sort of saying that we initially had a lot of home cooking. We had a lot of home cooking also being fueled by home delivery and pickup services, sort of adding to this general pre-pandemic trend of eating more at home. But over the last couple of months, we have also seen that consumers are valuing offers that has a good value for money and also healthy food options. So what we see is essentially a very fragmented development where individual cities can have quite different evolvements of consumer behavior. So it's a tricky thing to assess, but on aggregate level, it seems like restaurants that offer value for money, healthy food alternatives, and also integrate themselves in a lot of these delivery platforms that you see online nowadays. Those are essentially the winners of the situation that we have found ourselves in now.
I just want to add something, Cecilia, to answer your question also. A different behavior. Of course, I've seen different behaviors. It's not so common that people drink wine during lunches here in Sweden, but that's more common during Corona to drink wine or beer during lunch than water.
Interesting. Yep. Yeah. Well, I can understand that. So Håkan, you touched on this earlier, but what's going to happen when you can't sit outside anymore? When October, I don't know, maybe we should start with Johan. Winter comes earlier to Sweden, but you are able to eat, to serve indoors much more so than in the US. So maybe it's not as big an issue as it would be in the US. I'm not sure. Can you?
You want me to refer the question? Yeah. Well, we have indoor restaurants. We have basically all the time. We have been closing all July, all the time. All the time I've been a restaurateur, and so we're embracing the cold water, cold winds and cold weather because that's our business time. So as soon as the summer went away here, because the autumn is really coming really fast now here in Sweden. We also see that Rolled Kök is getting back their its normal customers, and we are up like 70% of the sales last year. The big thing we are expecting is the government stimulation of the salaries of the staff is quitting in the mid December, and I think we're going to see a big difference in valuing your work in our industry. People are a little bit afraid still. I think we're going to be more effective. Like I told my business companion today, I think in 3-4 years for our company, it's been and also in my age, I was starting to get a little fat and happy, and it's been a really slap in my face to not be fat and happy and start working again effectively. I think Corona has done very much for me. I'm very positive.
Okay. Well, so it sounds like moving inside is not going to be that much of an issue. I know here in Washington, D.C., 50%, you can only see 50% the people that they normally have. And for myself, I'm a little uncomfortable sitting inside in a restaurant. I much prefer to be outside. So Håkan, you touched on this earlier. Do you want to elaborate a little more?
Well, yeah, I think the sense in the US is that people are very hesitant about sitting indoor until there actually is a vaccine. We're going to open 25%, which is for us 42 seats. We have a big restaurant. We have 4 different rooms, so separating people is very easy for us. There would be no issue about people sitting too close to each other. We can serve 42 and maybe turn that a couple of times if we're lucky, depending on how many people are interested in eating indoor. And then November 1, the plan is to be 50%, which for us is 83 people. So now we're talking about, if we can do 83 people and turn, we are actually in fairly good shape. The big question mark is how many are actually coming to eat indoor. That is going to be the real question. And I feel sometimes that in the US, the media tends to sort of blow up a lot of scary scenarios of what's happening. And I mean, we had a family the other day who came to eat outdoor, and they brought their own paper plates, their own plastic utensils. They all had gloves on their hands. And, you know, I'm just wondering, is that really, why? Is that really necessary? I don't really get that. So it just feels that it becomes a killjoy in a sense. Now, when eating out in a restaurant is supposed to be really a pleasant experience. But I think that with the new seating arrangements that we're allowed to have, 25 and then 50, I think a lot of restaurants will actually be able to do that. If you're a small restaurant with 40, 50 seats, well, you're going to have 12 seats. I mean, it's nothing. That's not going to work. But like you once said, for bigger restaurants, I think it's going to be a lot easier.
Christopher, anything you want to add to this? The difference between the US and Sweden and in terms of outdoor?
Well, not really. Johan and Håkan are the real experts, but I noticed that my old home city of Gothenburg, they were thinking about allowing outdoor serving all year around. And I sort of can see in front of me how Gothenburg being known for rain that is sort of coming sideways and from below as well, and storm winds are sort of blowing people's appetizers straight in their faces in mid-November when it's cozy outside. So I'm not really sure whether it's going to save my favorite spots in Gothenburg, this proposal, but yeah, we'll see what the future brings.
Well, let's move on to innovations and solutions here a little bit. And Christopher, I know this is your area of expertise here, and Håkan, you touched on the menus with the QR code. I personally like that a lot too. Can we discuss a little about branding and packaging and so forth, particularly with takeout or even sitting outside, bistro style at Aquavit? What are you doing to make people feel like they're at Aquavit and not at the next door bistro, so to speak? Do you have nice what do you say, like napkins or packaging, and in takeout in particular? What do you put your name on the bags, or yeah, please.
Yeah, we do all of that, and actually one positive thing during this summer is that Emma and also the people in the front of the house have actually been very busy developing new things that would work with outdoor dining and the situation we have. So we just started last week, for example. We have a hot dog package, where we make 3 different kinds of hot dogs ourselves with condiments and beverages, packaged very nicely with our name. And right away you can see that, wow, people really want that. And so we've done a number of things. We also have a package where you have a number of drinks together with different snacks that people eat outdoor for maybe a bottle of champagne. Things like that has worked very well for us. So we have a PR firm, obviously, that are working very hard on social media, which is, of course, incredibly important to present all the different things that we do. But we are very busy in branding and keeping our name. But at the end of the day, we are a Nordic restaurant, Scandinavian restaurant, and we're very, very mindful keeping that concept alive and not trying to branch out and be something for everybody.
Johan, any thoughts? Do you do any particular things? Packaging?
Well, I think Håkan can agree with me that when you have a restaurant, and I would say Rolf's Kök and AG, and we have our kitchen to serve our customer in the restaurant. It's not so easy to change for takeaway. I mean, it's a question of packaging, as you said. So in the beginning, we tried everything. Of course, we did a takeaway menu in Rollkök. It was a huge success the first week, and then it just went less and less, and finally it cost us money to continue that program. And so we decided in Rollkök, how can we make buzz? So I came up with the idea that why don't we invite cool chef friends to have a guest chef appearance in Rollkök once a week. And that was a huge success. We were packed as we could be, March to June in Tuesday nights. AG has been working quite well all time long with the stimulants program from the government, and to keeping down the staff costs. But we tried to do delivery with the raw meat, as we are the place to buy meat in Sweden. We took the opportunity to try to deliver meat packages to grill at home, and that was not a success, but it worked. And Djurskogs, of course, it's all about delivery in Djurskogs, and of course that increased a lot during the high season of Corona, and I mean the high season of Corona in Sweden was April, May, and June. I'm not saying that we are back to normal again, but almost.
Well, thank you. Well, here in DC, we had a tremendous shortage of toilet paper for a while here. And whenever you ordered takeout from a restaurant, they would offer to add a roll of toilet paper. And I think that really increased the takeout orders tremendously here in DC. A little crazy, but Christopher, can you add, what are your thoughts? I know this is your expertise here in terms of the innovations and so forth in the industry.
There are a lot of different scenarios for what is going to be sort of the salvation for the industry. I bet on two of them. The first one is about a lot of businesses going hybrid and offering delivery menus, but also doing the sort of dine out experience as well. Because what we see now with all these platforms is essentially a new way for people, especially in urban areas, to not only have dinner at home, but also lunch and breakfast and those kinds of things. And on the continent, in Germany and France, we have seen an incredible increase in the number of orders for breakfast in particular, but also for lunch, which is fascinating to people's homes. So there is an industry within the industry that essentially consists of delivery-only kitchens. That is also called like cloud dark ghost kitchens, that is only operating these takeout menus. So what they have is quite a low cost associated to running them, because you don't need a physical restaurant in the true sense of the word. So hybrid as a way of reaching new customer segments, essentially serving individuals that want to eat less food prepared by themselves, but at their homes. Secondly, I believe that there is a lot of potential in the scenario that concerns plant-based innovation. In the UK last year, 1 out of 4 product that was released on the UK market was plant-based. We see the same thing in Sweden. We see a similar development in Germany. What is the difference essentially when it comes to traditional products compared to plant-based products is that there is a lot of margin associated to the plant-based products. So in an industry where we have a lot of liquidity problems, but also a solidity problem, if COVID continues to evolve the way it is on aggregate level, there might be an opportunity for a lot of restaurants to to find margins by essentially changing their menus to plant-based alternatives. So it could be good for sustainable reasons, but it could also be good for the bottom line. So that's essentially the two scenarios I'm betting on, but there are a lot of them out there now. So we'll see what happens.
Well, thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about the physical setup and so forth about the restaurants. You've both touched on that before here. The bar seating and so forth. Will the bar ever come back, so to speak? The bar sitting and watching the bartender mix drinks. Will that be happening again? What do you think, Johan?
I'm sure of it. People are longing for that in Sweden, and people want to go out. And I have to say that, I mean, when you talk about a restaurant experience, I've been in a couple of interviews here in Sweden of the future of COVID, and they talk about that food is everything. Food is basically nothing with a restaurant experience. The food is of course important, but going out to eat in a restaurant, it's I mean, it's been I mean, inns and restaurants has been very important for this socializing in thousands of years. I don't think COVID-19. I'm 100% that in 3 years it will basically look the same as it did before COVID. Maybe people gonna are taking care of. I think we're going to take care of our hygiene a little bit better, wash our hands a little bit more. I'm 100% that alcohol gel will be common in the restaurants. That's the future, but I'm 100% that it's going to look basically the same in less than 3 years.
And what do you think, Håkan?
Well, I agree with Johan that now when we open 25%, 50%, we'd have to take away all bar stools, for example. I mean, nobody can stand at the bar and have a drink. And I'm 100% sure that will be back. And what's driving it is really, I think, is when there's a vaccine for COVID. When that is done and people are vaccinated, they will be not afraid to have close contact with other people. I think that is going to be the driving force. And in fact, now you say that it's coming in a month or two, starting at least. That's going to be big relief for people, and people will start going out. So we can, as a big restaurant, again, we can keep separate distance now. I mean, maybe restaurants in the future will start thinking about putting in HEPA filters in the ventilation system. They're already talking about that. I think those things, innovations that will be helpful. But people, and also Christopher talked about takeout delivery will be much bigger, and that's true. I just wonder if how much that takes from restaurants and how much takes from cooking yourself at home. So I'm not sure. There will still be place for restaurants. People need to go out and they need to socialize with other people. There will be changes in how it's done, but it's not going to disappear.
Well, thank you. That's very comforting that we're not going to be virtually dining all here. We're going to actually be dining in person. Any closing comments, Christopher?
Well, I believe Johan and Håkan has a very good point that we go out for reasons other than the food, of course. So I sincerely hope that the Roaring 20s are coming. We just have to wait a bit longer.
I love that, the Roaring 20s. I think that's a very good thing to end on here today. The Roaring 20s are coming. Thank you so much to our esteemed speakers here, Håkan Svan, Christopher Laurel, and Johan Jureskog. Fantastic. It was very insightful, interesting, and informative. Just perfect, actually. And for those of you who unfortunately need to jump off now and do not want to, we can see that Emma Bengtsson has logged on here, and she's going to teach us how to do Gravlax Emma style. But if you do need to jump off, please join us soon. We will send out a web link so that you can watch this again. And we will soon have another webinar about the US election coming in October. We're very excited about that. So with that, thank you for Zooming with us, if you're leaving us. But for the rest of us, hello, Emma. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, Emma.
Emma? She's muted, I see. There we go. Okay.
Does that work? You guys hear us?
Yes, yes. Hey, Emma. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you here. Can you please tell us, how did you end up in the US and cooking and getting 2 Michelin stars? Fantastic.
Wow. I always wanted to move to New York. It's been a dream of mine since I was a kid. So 10 years ago, give or take, I was offered a pastry chef position here. There was no question. I just packed my bags and was going to be here for 1 year, and now it's 10 years later. So.
Fantastic.
Right? It seems to happen in this city. Okay.
Yep.
Do you tell people to stay away from them? All right. Got it. So there's still this rule with 6 feet distance, so I just need to make sure that no one is around from no one mask in the kitchen. All right.
Okay. Take it away. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. So I'll just show you a quick and easy way to make Gravlax at home, which is not that difficult, I think. So it's obviously been evolved a little bit throughout the years over here. So we're doing it in different techniques, but we always start with a really nice salmon. We get ours from Norway. That's one of my favorite ones. There's different techniques. I know I learned in school to cure it with the skin on, and you would just score the skin. But we find it that it gets a better, it gets more evenly cured if you take the skin off. So,
can you ask them to do that at the store, or is that something you need to do yourself?
You can definitely get help to do that at the store. No problem at all. You can even, I think nowadays, buy salmon that's already without the skin.
Okay.
And what we like to do is to get a more even cure, we'll take the belly away and we take the tail away because they're so different in density and or like how thick they are. So we normally use this in a bueves or a seafood stew or family meal or something like that.
Or a tartare.
Exactly.
Yep.
You got to utilize everything you have, right? Not throwing anything away. So I also like to split the side in half. And then the traditional way, or what we do is, I still like to do a 50-50 mix of sugar and salt. I know everyone has their own specialty. Some people don't use sugar at all. Some use 75-25 ratio, but I like to use 50-50. And then I use crushed white pepper. We'll add that. And then the dill we're using, we always tend to get a lot of stems when we pick the nice dill. So those are what we're saving. And that's mostly because most of the flavor is in the stems, especially if you crush them up with the salt and sugar mix. So we'll take a good amount of that. And then if I have more time, I normally stand around and I'll just squeeze everything in. I'm gonna chop it down a little. Put it in. And then as much as possible, you want to release all the liquid, all the juices from the dill stems into the sugar and salt. That. So if you are doing this at home, you can use a Tupperware or any container that fit in your fridge. I know it's really hard to fit a big tray in there, but we want to make sure that we cover all the sides. And then what we started doing here at the restaurant to get an even more even cure is we're using a Gravlax machine, and that will speed up the process a little bit, and it will also keep the flavor going all the way through. But it's not everyone who has that at home, so I would just recommend that every day you take it out of the fridge, use a pair of gloves, massage it, flip it, and then for every 24 hours that goes, you're gonna get more and more liquid, and the sugar and the salt is gonna melt down almost to a syrup, and that's what you want. I would say it would take around 3 days to have it in the fridge. Obviously, yes.
3 days, okay.
3 days. It can depend a little bit on how thick the salmon is. If you have a really skinny one, it might be ready a little bit earlier. The best way I've described to people is to almost think about it as when you bake a cake. Everyone keeps telling you to touch it, and you can kind of feel if it's still like a little liquidy in the middle. That, to me, seems to be like the easiest way to explain to home cooks on how it should feel. It should be a little bit firmer in the middle, so you don't want too much of that gooey cake mix that you can feel in the fridge, even though it's a salmon. So we'll put this in the fridge, and after 3 days, you can walk around. Hopefully, do this. It will come out looking a little bit firmer and a little bit darker in color. And when you touch it, you should feel like it has that firmness throughout the whole thing.
And how long can you keep this for?
Depending on how little you touch it and how much it's in the fridge and how well it's wrapped up, I would say preferably eat it within 10 days.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily always go bad after that, but if you are not planning on eating it straight away, I would recommend to freeze it. If you freeze it down and take it out, defrost it in the fridge, it'll come out in a really nice flavor for you to eat. It stores really, really well in the freezer. So a lot of our salmon that we turn into tartare and different preparation, and that's what we want, little pieces. We actually do freeze in to get a more better cut from them.
And then again, it lasts for 10 days after you take it out of the freezer, is that correct?
I would say a little bit less, because you started a process that you stopped, and then you're starting it again. So the best thing with fish in general is to always trust your senses. If it smells a little bit off to you, it most likely is off. Or if it feels a little sticky, it is probably off as well. So when it comes to fish, anything that doesn't feel right always mostly indicate that it's not right. So always trust your instincts. So what we do as well is after the 3 days when we take it out, we let it air dry on a rack in the fridge for 24 hours to just firm it up a little bit more. It's not necessarily that you have to do that. It's just something that we started doing to get a more even consistency when we start cutting it. And when you do cut it as well, you always want to cut against the grains. I forgot what it's called. I call it grains. So the easiest way to say that is to cut from the tail forward in an angle. That way you get the most perfect pieces, I would say. They keep together the most. If you cut in the other direction, they're going to start falling apart, and you get a less nicer cut from it. So this is our Gravlax.
Fantastic. What do you serve that with at the restaurant?
Oh wow! So Gravlax is something that's been on the menu since way before I took over, but we've always done it in 2 different ways. So in the bar and outside at some moment, we just serve it very traditional with a homesta sauce, some pickled red onions, pig dill, and lemon. In the dining room, when we have that part open, we have done so many different creations. It's so fun to take such a classical household item and turn it into Michelin star dishes. And it gets more fun, but it also gets harder because it's always been on the menu. And so we'll probably done 40 different versions of it by now, I think. But it's very rewarding, and people here loves to eat it. So it's a nice touch to our menus.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. Can I just ask you quickly, anything fun that has happened during the COVID debacle here for you? Anything new, any new dishes that you're actually excited about the change? No, nothing.
No, the most exciting thing was to be when we did the menu for outdoor. We started thinking more in a classical way. Like, what do you want when you're sitting out on the terrace? Like, what is Swedish summer to us? And that's not always something that we could maybe have in. I never really thought about having inside of a restaurant in the same way. So it kind of opened up the possibility to explore in a way a different cuisine. So that has been very exciting to be able to do dishes that we might not normally have ever done before. So I guess that's the good part that came out.
Okay, well, it's just nice to hear that there is actually something positive that's coming out of this too. It must have been very difficult for all of you, obviously. So, anything you want to add on the Gravlax, Emma?
Sorry?
Anything you want to tell us more about the Gravlax, or?
I think that's
Having a little bit of difficult, but couldn't really hear what Emma said there at the end, but it looked fantastic.
It's never quiet in a restaurant.
No, yeah.
Happens.
Well, thank you, Emma. We're so honored that you took time out of your busy day to join us and teach us this.
That's really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you.
So with that, I want to thank everybody again. Thank you, Håkan Svan. Thank you, Johan Juresko. Thank you, Christopher Larell. And a huge thank you to Anna Månsson and Yushan Yu for organizing and all the technical help here. And our hopes are, of course, are like as you as alumni indeed feel a little more connected after today's webinar to your Handelshögskolan. And don't forget to tune in October. And I'm actually gonna give the word over to Anna, who is gonna talk a little bit about, actually, I would imagine what's going on in October and so forth. But first, I would like to say thank you. I am Cecilia Browning, and from the entire board of the American Friends of SSE, the Alumni Chapter in the US, we wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe and stay well. And now go out and go to a restaurant and spend lots of money.
Hell
Anna.
yes.
Anna.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you all you alumni who decided to join us today. It's so nice to see all of you. We, of course, hope that you want to join us for the rest of the semester's webinars and events, which you can always find on our website, which will be updated shortly with, brand new webinars and events coming up. I also want to ask you to please fill out the survey that will be sent out shortly so that we can keep improving and refining our offerings to all of you. And yeah, so stay tuned. Make sure you read the newsletters. If you don't get them, tell us and we'll set you up with getting all the necessary info and all the fun stuff we have planned for the rest of the fall. Thank you all, and have a lovely rest of the day.
Thank you.